this discount strategy and involved, you're doing twice as much work to get that same like revenue number. So the way I like to look at it is try not to do more work for less, because that's essentially what you'd be doing. In a way, to an extent, that's what you can be doing with some of your discounts if they're not necessarily thought out that well in being strategic. So think of ways where you're not doing more work for less and such. So, and another thing to consider too is when you're doing discounts, what type of signals are you sending to players? Because, for example, and I think I provided this in the previous example too, is if you discount too much too soon, like from when you release, it can really hurt you, as I mentioned before, but it can hurt your players because from your players, from the perceived value, but you, because if you already set the expectation like, hey, look, we're willing to go as low as 50% off, then people are going to hold out for that. You set the precedence. You let them know that, hey, I'm willing to go this low. And if you do that, then it could be a real uphill battle to try to initiate some type of strategy to really get those people. Because even if you do it like 30% or 20% later, and those are good discounted numbers there as well, if they already know that that's as low as you can go, it's definitely going to be a challenge. So again, it's definitely worth considering what are the signals that you're sending to people. Now on the flip side, like if you, let's say on launch, like go as low as like 10% or 15%, I think that's in an appropriate threshold area where people are still getting a deal. They know that off launch they're probably going to get a deal anyways, and they can take advantage of that. And then later you can determine, if you haven't already, what's going to be the right, discounting strategy for you going forward. And as you go on with the launch of your game and everything, it's also good to consider the shelf life of that, and then how much of a discount makes sense at certain periods of time. So if you start off with like 10% and then in 6 months or to a year or whatever the case may be, you can start determining what is going to be an appropriate one. So then that way, like, thinking more long-term and stuff, because again, even if you're not selling as many units as you would like, if you're still making a good amount of sales from the regular price game and getting and then reducing it, you still have to do double the amount of work, double if it's 50% off, but you're still doing potentially more work depending on how much more you discount. Now, if it's a game that's been on the market for a while, then it might make more sense to do 50% off, because people have known, like, okay, that game's been out like a year, 2 years, whatever, extended period of time. Then it makes more sense to probably discount there. So another thing I think is important too is when you're considering discounts and other things, think about your audience and your community. So one way to pose this is, how can you and others create more value for your audience? So one way to do this is pair up with like other devs and have special events or sales. This is something that I believe as a group of developers can approach, or whether it's an individual or a group, can as long as you have a group with other people, can approach Steam to have sales. I think I'm trying to remember. I think it was Chris Zukowski a while ago mentioned this as an idea before too, and it's another. And a lot of times when you have those grouped together, you could have it like they like stack if you have like sale prices going on and such too. So it's one way. You're providing more value for people because you're giving them an opportunity. Like, they probably already like the style of game. You're pairing up with other devs that have that same style or genre of game, and now you're giving them an opportunity to have a whole list of games that they really like, and it gets you that much more in front of like a really good core audience. So so by doing that and collaborating with others, you really are providing more value for your audience, and those types of things can work out extremely well. So something to consider there, and it's like making your own opportunities there too, not necessarily just relying on a Steam sale where everybody is going to be waiting for that. So it gives you a little bit more exposure there. And then another thing to do on that same front is you can create bundles with other devs too. So again, creating discounts. So let's say it could be one strategy where you're not discounting that much, but you're going in with the plan of creating bundles with other devs, and maybe you can offer significant discounts with those bundles. So as a group, you can make this bundle super appealing and everything. But it could potentially be like disguised in the sense where people don't see what they're actually getting from the discounted price. I mean, they could probably figure it out and stuff, but no one's going to go through all that extra work. So again, that's a great way where maybe you can discount a little bit more heavily, but without it necessarily just, being seen as if they're just going right to your page and seeing what that discount amount is. So that could be another way in terms of like providing another opportunity for people to get your game, get it with others at a good price, and giving you a little bit more control on that front. So the final question here, as I said I would answer, is should you discount your game? And here's my take on it. There's really no right or wrong answer. People have used discounts before that have worked really well. People have stood their ground and haven't really discounted much at all, and done well on that front too. But if it were me, and what I would encourage other people to do is to try to maintain a standard level of pricing with little to no discounting. Now, this, of course, is a case-by-case basis. This really depends on a lot of other factors, like what type of game it is. Is it free-to-play? What's your pricing model in general? Like, there's so many other things to consider. But if you're in this situation and something like this model makes sense to you, I mean, that's just how I think it should be. Because what it comes down to is you're maintaining that level of integrity that players can respect. And that's important, because the way I look at it is simply from this perspective. You're making games, and you're really committed to doing this beyond just one game. And if you continue going forward with that, you're going to set the expectations of your player base that, you really care and believe in not just your pricing, but you're putting out a quality product. And I'm sure that this would also carry over with everything else that you're doing, from marketing to how your brand is being represented, like all these other things that we've talked about on the show. That's why I think, from my perspective, and again, I'm just doing this from me. Have I made a game or launched a game, and could this idea change dramatically when or if I do that? Yes, it definitely could. But I still think that mindset is a good one to have, to let the pricing be a factor in terms of maintaining a standard level of quality that you will continue to carry on as long as you're making games. So that's my perspective of it, and that's what I would encourage you to try to do, is just maintain that level of pricing without going too hefty on your discounting. Now, again, there's a lot of other factors at play, a lot of other variables. There's like so many different things to probably consider in that too. And that I'm not even going to begin to go into the different scenarios, because there's a lot of them. But that's how I would try to approach it. It's not to say that's the way to do it. That's what I would try to lead with, though. So I hope that makes sense there. So with all that, I hope you found this helpful in terms of how to approach this topic in terms of pricing from a different way to kind of get inside your player's head and what does pricing really mean to them, and how does and how does it play into you? I mean, ultimately, it's your decision. I wouldn't ever let like a player dictate what my pricing should be for your game. Face value. Like, don't ask them and because I'm also a firm believer in let people vote with their wallets to a degree, opposed to what they feel that they would pay for, because that can always change. So these are just ways that I would go about approaching things and trying to be mindful of what it's like from a player's perspective when they're considering purchasing a game. What are the potential things that are going through their head, and really putting yourself in their shoes, because again, I think that can be really helpful in having a better understanding of where they're coming from, whether they're happy with the pricing or not. It's okay. It just gets you a little bit more prepared for that. So to kind of summarize everything we talked about here, before you get ready to sell, make sure you're ready to sell. And as we mentioned, like, do things align with your goals? And are you providing the best experience possible? And do you need more time with your marketing? Those are all really important things to consider before you start selling your game, because it's going to make a difference to the players as well if you're really well equipped and prepared on those fronts. Really important one here is consider the perceived value. We talked about that a lot. Really understanding what are you showing to people based off of your price, not just the original set price that you're creating, but also what that price is after it's discounted. And in line with that, know what signals you're sending to people. If you're heavily discounting your game right off the bat, or even not too much further down the road, what kind of signals are you sending to people? Because if you're sending the wrong ones, they're just gonna you're setting those expectations to be in a position where you don't necessarily want to be, unless of course a specific strategy or your product type kind of like dictates that. But in most cases, you probably don't want to go too low, because again, it won't be sending the right signals to the people that you want to achieve the goals that you're looking for when you're selling your game. So I really appreciate all of you for joining me again and listening to this topic. And if you're interested, I would really love to continue this conversation on Twitter. So whenever you're listening to this, whether it's the day of this episode launched or you're catching up, love to continue this conversation on Twitter. It's just at IGM Podcast. Just tweet anytime you'd like. I think it could be a really good one. And so again, thank you so much for listening, and looking forward to having you join us next time on Indie Game Movement. Hey everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of Indie Game Movement. I'm Andrew Pappas, your host, and the show's producer is Mustafa Price. If you enjoy and value the show's content, you can support us even more by going to Patreon and visiting www.patreon.com/IGM podcast and select the tier that best suits your needs. Show notes for this episode can be found by visiting rengenmarketing.com, the number episode of the show. Rengen Marketing is a consulting marketing company that helps indie devs with their marketing efforts. Whether you need guidance with your game's marketing strategy or could use a free marketing plan template, then please visit www.rengenmarketing.com and take action. A special thanks to Dakota Saw for Season 2's opening theme and Melissa Gellis for the new logo design. And as always, thanks for being such great listeners, and we'll see you next time on Indie Game Movement.